This is Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. Here now, Tony Bruschi.
Becky Hill walked into a South Carolina courtroom just the other morning and pled guilty to 4 felonies and walked out without spending a single night in jail. She smiled for the cameras on her way out, and somehow that's not even the most infuriating part of this story. Here's why this matters right now. Alex Murdaugh is sitting in prison serving life without parole for murdering his wife Maggie and son Paul. His defense team has been screaming for nearly 2 years that the woman who oversaw his jury, the clerk of court responsible for managing exhibits, babysitting jurors, and assisting the judge, allegedly tampered with the jury to help secure a guilty verdict. A verdict his lawyers say she needed to cash in on a book deal. The South Carolina Supreme Court is scheduled to hear oral arguments on Murdaugh's appeal in February, and today the same clerk just admitted under oath that she's a liar, a thief, and someone who violated court orders for her own benefit. She wasn't charged with jury tampering, and the judge made sure everyone knew that's why she's not going to prison. So let's talk about what actually happened in that courtroom in Calhoun County, and let's talk about what it means for Murdaugh's shot at a new trial, because this thing is messier than anyone wants to admit. And while we're going through the mess, in the comments section, would love to get your feedback. So please do weigh in on YouTube in the comments. And press subscribe while you are at it. Becky Hill, 58 years old, former Colleton County Clerk of Court, stood before Judge Heath Taylor and pled guilty to obstruction of justice, perjury, and 2 counts of misconduct in office. The obstruction charge stems from her showing sealed crime scene photographs to journalists in violation of direct court order. The perjury charge, and this is important, comes from her lying about those photographs under oath during the January 2024 hearing where Judge Jean Toll was deciding whether Murdaugh deserved a new trial. The judge asked her point blank, "Did you let anyone from the press see the sealed exhibits?" Her answer, no. That was a lie, and now it's a felony conviction. So she lies in that one where Jean Toll kicks it down the road of Alex Murdaugh getting a retrial. The person who's literally up there testifying about, did you you need to tell the truth because what you're saying really matters in terms of that decision. But Jean didn't seem to want to deal with it all that much. So she kicked it down the road. The 2 misconduct charges involve money. Hill helped herself to nearly $10,000 in federal funds earmarked for child support services. Title IVD incentive money that was never hers to take. She also received a $2,000 gift from her own office for personal use. At the hearing today, she handed over a check for $11,880 in restitution, wrote it out ahead of time, apparently, came prepared to pay her way out of this. You got me. Here's your check. She's a lovely lady. Judge Taylor gave her a suspended sentence across the board, 1 year suspended on each misconduct count, 5 years suspended on the obstruction and perjury, 3 years of probation, 100 hours of community service, credit for 1 day served. She's going home tonight. She's not going to prison tomorrow. She's not going to prison ever unless she violates probation. And here's a line that matters. Judge Taylor said it plainly from the bench. Had Mr. Hubbard's team uncovered any jury tampering, this sentence would be very different. Well, I got news for you. They kind of did. It's just y'all don't want to hear it. Y'all don't want to accept it. You don't. When you actually have a juror that's saying her words influenced my verdict, that's jury tampering. Y'all can pretend it's not, but it is. And I'm not some fan of pro-Alex Murdaugh person here either. I'm pro-reality and let's keep this a sane playing field and fair. You can't have it both ways. So that's the state drawing a line in the sand 2 months before the Supreme Court hears Murdaugh's appeal. We investigated this woman. We charged her with crimes. We got her to plead guilty, but we didn't find jury tampering. Case closed. Except it's not closed. Not even a little bit. Because let's be honest about who Becky Hill is and what she did during and after that trial. This is a woman who was negotiating book deals while the jury was still deliberating. A woman who, according to testimony from Barnwell County Clerk Rhonda McLeaven, talked openly about wanting to write a book so she could make more money and get a lake house. A woman who McLeaven testified suggested a guilty verdict would help her sell more copies. She released a book called Behind the Doors of Justice with a co-author, made roughly $100,000 off it, and then had to admit she plagiarized portions of the text. She struck a deal with a documentary crew to use the county courtroom in exchange for promoting her book. She arranged for someone to photograph Murdaugh in a holding cell for the book. All allegations here. She used her official social media accounts to hawk copies. She bought lunches for staff and prosecutors and vendors with county money. She faced 76 separate ethics violations from the State Ethics Commission. And during the trial itself, multiple jurors testified that Hill made comments suggesting Murdaugh was guilty before deliberations even started. One juror, referred to as Juror Z in court documents, said Hill told them to watch Murdaugh closely and pay attention to his actions. That juror testified under oath that Hill's comments influenced her guilty vote. To me, she made it seem like he was already guilty, she said. Another clerk testified that Hill and a bailiff drove a juror home alone, one-on-one contact that should never have happened between court staff and sitting jurors. There were allegations that Hill was involved in pushing out a juror named Myra Crosby, who had reportedly expressed uncertainty about Murdaugh's guilt. The defense has called it a conspiracy to remove a potential holdout. And Judge Toll heard all this in January of 24. And she denied Murdaugh's motion for a new trial, but she didn't exactly give Hill a ringing endorsement. Toll said she found the clerk not completely credible as a witness. She said Hill had been attracted by the siren call of celebrity. That siren call. That's a sitting judge in open court saying she didn't believe the person responsible for managing the jury, but she believed her enough not to give Alex Murdaugh a new trial. Those siren calls. And now we know Hill committed perjury during that very hearing. The state just proved it. She lied to Toll's face about the sealed photographs while she was seeking that siren call. Today she admitted it. The perjury conviction is specifically about the photographs, not about her denials or jury tampering. But Murdaugh's lawyers argue that's a distinction without a difference. If she lied under oath about one thing in that hearing, why should anyone believe what she said about anything else? So when solicitor Rick Hubbard stood up in court and explained why there are no jury tampering charges, you have to understand the context. Hubbard said his team reviewed hundreds of pages of interviews, audio recordings, video, financial documents. He said SLED interviewed all 11 jurors who remained on the panel. He said none of them corroborated the tampering allegations. One juror admitted Hill made an offhand comment about Murdaugh's demeanor, but said it didn't affect his vote. The other 10 denied any improper conduct whatsoever. Hubbard pointed out that the 3 jurors who did make allegations, 630, 785, and 741, had credibility problems of their own. Juror 785 was removed during the trial for discussing the case prematurely. Juror 741 was an alternate who never actually deliberated, and Juror 630 reportedly changed her story and later attributed to pressure she felt to other jurors, not Hill. Hubbard emphasized that none of these allegations surfaced during the trial. They only came out after Murdaugh's defense team started interviewing jurors post-verdict. That's the state's position. We looked at it, we couldn't prove it, move on. That's what they're saying. Nothing like investigating yourself and coming out with answers that seem to look well in your favor. But here's the problem with that position. The woman they investigated is now a convicted felon who admits she lied under oath during the very proceeding where she was asked about her conduct, not about tampering directly, about the sealed photographs. But the defense argues that's exactly the point. You catch someone lying about one thing, you get to question everything else they did. Hill swore she didn't show sealed evidence to the press. She did. She got caught. She pled guilty. So when she swore she didn't improperly influence jurors, why should anyone believe her? Dick Harpootlian, Murdaugh's lead attorney, put it this way back in May when Hill was first arrested. This perjury count is an accusation by the state that they can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she lied during that proceeding. And if she lied during that proceeding about one thing, it certainly challenges her credibility on any other thing. And he's not wrong. That's basic witness impeachment. You catch someone lying about one thing, the jury, or in this case, the Supreme Court, gets to question everything else they said. The defense's appeal to the Supreme Court makes three core arguments. First, jury tampering by Becky Hill, who they say inserted herself into the deliberations and tainted the verdict for personal financial gain. Second, the trial court allowed a week of testimony about Murdaugh's financial crimes, his theft of millions from clients, from grieving families, from his own law firm, which the defense calls a trial within a trial that distracted jurors from the lack of direct evidence linking him to the murders. Third, investigative failures by SLED, including allegations that crime scene techs never tried to lift fingerprints from the feed room where Paul was killed, never followed up on the tracks that didn't match Murdaugh's vehicles, and never submitted DNA found under Maggie's fingernails to the national database for comparison. The state's response is straightforward. The jury convicted Murdaugh because he was obviously guilty. The kennel video put him there at the scene minutes before the murders. He admitted lying to investigators, both victims' phones locked within seconds of each other, consistent with the prosecution's timeline. A rain jacket tested positive for gunshot residue. The financial evidence showed motive, a gathering storm of ruin closing in on him. And 11 of 12 jurors said Becky Hill had no influence on their decision. That's the battlefield. It's like, well, a lot of this seems to line up, and yes, you're right, but 11 out of 12 isn't 12 out of 12, and last I checked, this is not one of those things where it's just a majority rule. That's the battlefield. So February 11th, 2026, 5 justices, oral arguments, a decision that could either cement Murdaugh's conviction or blow the whole damn thing wide open again. And this is where things get uncomfortable, because we have to acknowledge something that nobody on either side wants to talk about. Even if Murdaugh wins this appeal, even if the Supreme Court orders a new trial, and even if he's acquitted of murder the second time around, he's not walking free. He's already serving 27 years in federal prison and another 40 years in state prison for his financial crimes. He's pled guilty to stealing more than $12 million. He admitted to defrauding the sons of his family's dead housekeeper out of a $4 million wrongful death settlement. He stole from a quadriplegic client. He stole from a state trooper. He stole from his own law partners for over a decade. So why does this appeal matter? It matters because the question isn't whether Alex Murdaugh killed his wife and son. The question is whether the system that convicted him operated with integrity. The question is whether a court clerk can turn a murder trial into a personal branding opportunity and face no real consequences. The question is whether South Carolina's judiciary is willing to confront its own failures, or whether it's going to circle the wagons and protect a verdict that might be compromised. Becky Hill stood in court and said she takes full responsibility for her actions. Good. She said there's no excuse for her mistakes. She said she'll carry the shame for the rest of her life. And then she smiled for the cameras on her way out. Free to go home, free to spend time with those grandchildren she cited when she resigned, free to move on with her life while the man she's accused of railroading sits in a cell. Maybe she didn't tamper with that jury. Maybe the 11 jurors who said she didn't influence them are telling the truth, and the one who said she did is mistaken. Maybe SLED did a thorough investigation, and there's simply nothing there. I don't know how you do that when you don't do part of the investigation, but hey, maybe isn't good enough when we're talking about a double murder conviction. Maybe isn't good enough when the person at the center of the allegations is now a proven liar. Maybe isn't good enough when the judge already said on the record that she didn't find the clerk credible. The South Carolina Supreme Court has a choice to make. They can look at this mess, the guilty plea, the perjury, the book deals, the sealed photographs, the juror testimony, the credibility findings, and decide the conviction stands anyway. Or they can look at it and say, this trial was too compromised to trust. What they can't do is pretend none of this happened. What they can't do is act like Becky Hill is just some footnote in a case that was otherwise clean. She was the person managing that jury. She was in the room. She had access. She had motive. And she has now admitted under oath that she broke the rules and lied about it. Alex Murdaugh may very well have killed his wife and son. The evidence against him is substantial. The kennel video is damning. His lies to investigators are damning. His financial desperation is damning. But damning isn't the same as proven beyond a reasonable doubt in a fair trial. And fair is exactly what's in question here. Becky Hill got probation and community service. She paid back the money she stole and walked out of court a free woman. The system looked at everything she did, the lies, the theft, the violations, the self-dealing, and decided that wasn't worth a single day in jail. February 11th, 5 justices will decide if the system is willing to hold itself to a higher standard that it held her. What do you think should happen? Tell me in the comment section on YouTube. I'd be very interested. Should Alex Murdaugh get a new trial based on the compromisation of his first trial due to Becky? Due to the poor investigative work, due to all those reasons cited, does he deserve a new trial? I would say yes. Do I think it changes a whole hell of a lot? No. But if you literally have a juror saying your verdict was influenced by someone that it should not have been, it's compromised. Whether you like it or not, whether your low-paid clerk of court screwed up a multi-million-dollar trial that you're now going to have to put on again and spend millions of dollars to deal with again. Yeah. Well, then the lesson learned here is you better have tighter housekeeping with your staff. Because I'm going to guess this is just kind of how Becky operated. Without check. It's how we do things here in the low country. It's a slower pace. And maybe you better get that shit up to standard. Because people from outside the low country are looking at you going, yeah, that's not the legal standard here. And at the end of the day, no matter what, you need to have fair trials. You just do. Even when that person is guilty as sin, let them hang themselves. Alex Murdaugh did not need Becky Hill to help convict him. Becky Hill needed Becky Hill to help make her head bigger and validate her existence. And Becky Hill has learned now the consequences to her actions. It's time South Carolina took a look at who it employed and the actions they took and be accountable for the choices of saying, yeah, Becky, this seems like a great position for you. And kept her there. Your thoughts in the comment section on YouTube. Looking forward to hearing them. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, do me a favor, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We'd really appreciate that. Helps us grow in the rankings and helps other folks know that we exist. So if you don't mind, take a quick moment, few words, kind words would be greatly appreciated on the Apple Podcast review section for Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. I do appreciate that so much. Until next time, my name is Tony Bruschi. We'll talk again.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Bruschi and the Hidden Killers podcast.